It is time for another episode of The Informer, and joining me today is an independent journalist named Rukshan Fernando. Rukshan, you also go by the name of Real Rukshan on social media. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Natalie.
Now, I wanted to talk to you as we move through 2020, there seems to be more of a debate about the messages that people are getting through mainstream media. And there are more and more independent journalists that are sort of popping up and telling their stories. And I think they're also growing in their followings because they are giving a very different narrative. And I wanted to start with how you became an independent journalist.
Yeah, sure. So I was kind of working in a similar field in terms of creating content in the events industry. But obviously, with what's happened with the lockdown situation, that industry has shut down. So I kind of transitioned into doing work around, I guess, independent journalism and creating content for the community that were discussing these topics online. So I just kind of transitioned my skills over to this kind of new venture that I started. And I set it all up. I registered everything, and I did kind of, it wasn't just something that I did, woke up one day and decided to be an independent journalist. It was kind of pre-planned, and, the process was set in place to get it done properly.
So you did all the paperwork so that when you are covering things like the lockdown protests and things like that, it's not that you're a blogger and you've turned up and are saying you're a journalist. You actually have all the paperwork, business paperwork to back that up.
That's correct. Yeah, I wanted to do it fully legitimately because there was obviously reasons why you could leave the house, and for those purposes, you had to have certain a registration under a certain type of business. So I did all that properly to make sure that I fell into that category.
And your following has grown quite quickly from what I can tell. Going through and watching your videos, you do have a particular opinion on how everything is going in Victoria and everything that's taking place. But what I have found is your delivery is very measured in the messages that you're giving. So when you're covering an actual event or story that you've been to, you are being, you're not just carrying on and saying, well, this is everything that's wrong. You're actually talking about the events that are taking place versus sharing your narrative. Is that something you've done on purpose or?
Yes, that's correct. I try to consume, I guess, what the mainstream media is saying, just to get that kind of perspective, especially the official perspective, which from government officials or from the police, what they're saying. Mm-hmm. And then obviously I spend a bit of time online just seeing what the community groups are saying and what people are actually saying about what they feel about this. So when you go to this event, you can kind of put those two things together and try to get, I guess, those multiple perspectives from different sides of the same debate, and try to present that in a way which is informative, but also remove some of my personal bias, which you've maybe seen in some of my other work on my feed. So it's really just about trying to tell the story of what people are feeling on the day, juxtaposition with what the actual what the government officials or what the police are saying.
So you went and covered a lot of the COVID lockdown protests. First of all, I want to know, the mainstream media showed us that the gatherings weren't that big. There was a very strong police presence. The police shut it all down really quickly. Any violence in terms of the arrests were because these people were fighting back. Was that, or has that been an accurate representation versus what you've seen?
Yeah, so I guess before I actually went to these protests and I was watching the media, I would assume that everything that was being said was, correct about what these protests were doing, and, the anti-government, the anti-lockdown, the anti-vaxxers, they're all anti. But when you actually go to these protests and you meet these people and you see what they're doing, a lot of the time it's just ordinary Victorians or ordinary Australians, and they just they're there to, share their grievances or share their message or whatever it is, but it's not the portrayal that the media has done of them. And I think, there's a massive disconnect between what the role of the media should be and what they're actually doing at these protests, because I think they're doing a disservice to the community by portraying these people as these kind of, crazed outskirt conspiracy theorists, which is not the case at all.
And there was a protest at the end of October, I think it was October 23rd, and you made an incredible video. The footage is just stunning, but in the bio that you had, it did state that there were, the ABC had reported 200 to 300 people were in attendance. But looking at that footage, it looks like there were thousands upon thousands there.
That's correct. Yeah. Personally, for me, like being there, because I was next to the actual mainstream media reporters as well. And as just an ordinary person, I can't comprehend how they can witness the same thing that I witnessed, which is see, thousands of people, and then turn around and say there was 200 people. It just beggars belief that the kind of misinformation that they're putting out there, it just really makes you question like everything else that they put out there as well, because they are actually there seeing the same thing that I'm seeing. They're taking selfies of themselves with the crowd behind them and all this kind of stuff. And then to turn around and say there's 200, 300 people there, it's just a massive disservice to the community in this country.
So I'm curious, if they're taking selfies of themselves with the crowds behind them, have you gone and checked social media, or are they posting those photos with a more accurate representation of what the crowds are?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't checked their social
Okay.
media. Yeah, their personal social media. Yeah.
So there are two things that I wanted to hit on with you. The first one being you were actually detained. There was a gathering, and in the 7 or 8 minute video, it shows you at the beginning arriving, speaking to the police, and there was a blonde, I'm assuming constable, I didn't look at her ranking, but she was quite lovely, asking you if you'd covered other protests, all of that. You're showing them your paperwork, you're wearing your mask, you offer them your COVID safe plan, which is what is required of you. And then fast forward later on, you try to leave, you explain to them that you're media, and they tell you to move to another part of the circle because the police had formed a ring around everybody. You then try and leave, and you were in fact detained and fined. And you had your camera switched off or taken off you at the time that you were being detained. Has anyone spoken to you about this since then, from the police or the Justice Department or anyone, to shed light on why you, if you had all of the appropriate paperwork, were detained, and was the same action taken against any of the mainstream media?
Yeah, so no one's spoken to me. And in terms of the other media that were there, the treatment that I saw them receive was a lot different. Whether it's because they're more known to the police media people there or not, I'm not sure. But a lot of them were let out of the circle earlier on when the same announcement happened. So they went outside. But for me, and I think there was maybe one more independent media photographer there, we kind of got caught up in the circle and we weren't allowed to leave. But it was very clear what we were doing. And the police that were there, they've been there most of the day. They have seen us working there. They've interacted with us. They've seen us. They can vouch for us. But they're not even willing to do that. They treat us as if we're doing something wrong because we are willing to cover what these protesters are saying and doing. Whereas the mainstream media, they just hang back on the side and just film the arrest, and they just tell, do the police narrative or whatever it is. So because I think we're prepared to kind of get up and actually cover what the protesters are saying and doing, the police aren't very receptive to that. And for that reason, I think they just kind of group us in with, they actually treat us like protesters because we're doing our job by covering what the protesters are doing, which is a bit ridiculous, I think, because the job of the media should be to actually cover these events. It's the same way the police are doing their job there. We should be allowed to do our job and cover what's happening, definitely.
And have any of the mainstream media reporters spoken to you about this or noticed that this treatment is happening, or there's not much conversation?
Yeah. I think they don't really care, to be honest. Even when we're there, they kind of we're like the pariahs on the side. They don't really they're not really receptive to anything that we're doing. So yeah, I think they're in their own little bubble, because I see a lot of the time they're kind of hanging out and chatting with the media, the liaisons from the police force, and there's a bit of a relationship there, and it's kind of like, they're doing their part and the police are doing their part and everyone's kind of chiming with each other. There's that kind of relationship. Whereas for the independent media, we don't really have that relationship. It's more so like, hey, you guys can't go there, you can't do this, don't go there. It's all that kind of more kind of rules and restrictions for us.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with us, and also for giving us a new perspective on everything that's happening in Melbourne. Real Rukshan is the name on all your social media accounts if people want to follow you and see some of your reports and videos, correct?
That's correct, yeah. The Real Rukshan. You can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Natalie.